A School of Her Own by Arleta Richardson. Chapter 6. The Problems Start.
Miss O'Dell, Edward is grabbing our rope again. We're trying to jump and he won't let us.
I walked out to the playground to see what was going on.
Edward, if you want to play with the girls' rope, suppose you help swing it for them to jump.
Edward looked at me with horror, but I put one end of the rope in his hand and took the other end myself. After every girl had a chance to jump, I gave the rope back to them and put my arm around Edward's shoulder.
Why aren't you playing stickball with the boys? I asked. Wouldn't that be better than interfering with the girls?
They don't want me to play.
Why not? You know the rules, don't you?
He nodded.
But they say I have to do it like they do and I can't because I'm a lefty. They say I do everything backwards.
He looked at me imploringly.
I try to use my right hand, Miss O'Dell, I really do. But it just won't work the way the left one does.
Of course it won't, I agreed.
The other boys can't work with their left hands as well either. I have an idea that might help you out. We'll talk about it when recess is over.
I went back into the room and took out my Bible. If I could find the scripture I needed, it would be a good lesson. By the time the children filed back in, I was ready.
We have something for everyone to do together, I announced. The beginners need help with their counting, so we'll start with them. Nancy, how many people in our room have brown hair?
Nancy stood importantly and counted.
8,
she reported.
Now, Toby, can you write 8 on the board?
He did, and then I asked,
Josie, how many people have blonde hair like yours? 7.
Toby wrote 7 on the board.
Ted, how many is that?
15.
But there are 16 of us in the room. Was someone forgotten?
Me,
Joel Gage answered.
No one counted me.
Oh, but your hair is red, Joel. You don't fit in one of these groups, do you?
I'm the only one with red hair here,
Joel bristled.
But I'm not the only one in the world.
You certainly aren't,
I told him.
There are many people with beautiful red hair like yours. Why do you suppose God made us all different?
So he wouldn't get us mixed up?
Jamie suggested.
Because he likes different colors?
Carrie said.
So we'll look like our folks,
Joel guessed.
Those are good reasons,
I nodded.
God uses us for different things, too. He doesn't choose us for how we look, but he often chooses people for what they can do. I found a story in the Bible that you may not have heard. You know that in the time of David, men fought wars with swords and stones. In one battle, they had some special men. Among all these soldiers, there were 700 chosen men who were left-handed, each of whom could sling a stone at a hare and not miss. What do you think of that?
Edward beamed, and the rest of the boys had the grace to look sheepish.
Can I copy that down and show it to my pa?
Edward asked.
He'll like that.
Of course, I said. That can be your writing lesson for today. Now, everyone, get your books out and finish the morning lessons.
As I looked at the heads bent busily over their work, I thought of the list of crimes I had found in my desk along with appropriate penalties. Telling lies, 2 lashes. Blotting your copybook, 2 lashes. Fighting on the school ground, 10 lashes. Fighting on the way home, 5 lashes. Using bad language, 8 lashes. I was sure the former teacher thought he was doing me a favor by letting me know the procedures for discipline, but I shuddered to think of using a switch on any child. Surely there were better ways to exact obedience. The kitchen was warm and smelled like fresh bread when I arrived home in the late afternoon.
Smells good, I sniffed appreciatively. Is that bean soup on the stove?
Yes, I thought it sounded like a perfect fall supper, Mrs. Williams replied. And it's easy to fix on a wash day. How was school?
It was fine. I think we'll just have to take a trip to the woods one of these days to start collecting leaves. The colors are so gorgeous, and just what the upper grades need for their biology notebook projects.
By the time you have your clothes changed, we can eat, Mrs. Williams told me. I just saw Pa and Len go into the barn. As we finished getting the table ready, they walked through the door. While Len washed for supper, he said, "I was fixing the fence on the back hill this afternoon, and I saw you leave the schoolhouse. Just a few minutes later, I noticed someone down there. Whoever it was disappeared around the corner before I could tell whether it was a boy or girl. Did you leave someone at school when you came home?"
"No," I replied. "I was the last to go. I wonder who it could have been. All the children left at least a half an hour before I did."
"I'll walk down after supper and check it out," Len offered. "I can't imagine anyone hanging around school just for the fun of it."
"Neither can I replied. "And I can't think of anyone who would come back for any other reason."
The picture of Abe poking at the window crossed my mind, but I dismissed it. Surely he wouldn't have stayed around after last week's encounter. During supper, Mrs. Williams told us that there would be a quilting party at the Gages' home a week from Saturday.
"I think you would enjoy it, Mabel," Alice said. "It would be a chance to meet all the families in the area."
"We'll take our dinner, and the men come to eat at noon," Mrs. Williams added. "I know that the ladies will enjoy getting acquainted with you. Do you think you could plan to stay?" They were obviously anxious to have me, and though I would have preferred to go home, I agreed.
"I'd like to know all the parents of my children," I said, "and that would be a good opportunity. But I'm not sure Mrs. Gage will want my hen tracks on her quilt. That's what Sarah Jane calls my stitching."
Mrs. Williams laughed. "The variety of stitches on a quilt is what makes it unique. I'm sure yours aren't as bad as all that." After prayers, Len and Mr. Williams started out for the school, and I brought my books to the table. The evening had turned cool, and the kitchen was a cozy place to work. The smell of fresh bread lingered in the air, and the fire crackled in the cook stove. Alice sat down opposite me with her sewing. I sighed over my papers.
"Oh, I see that Carrie Lawton has given the Upper Peninsula of Michigan away again. I do wish she had a better eye for a map." "Well, the Upper Peninsula is attached to Wisconsin, and it doesn't touch the rest of Michigan," Alice commented. "It does look as though it might belong to them." "It was Congress that made that decision in 1836, I answered, unable to resist the opportunity to teach. "Michigan and Ohio both wanted the strip of land that included the city of Toledo. So Congress let Ohio have the Toledo strip, and, in exchange, Michigan received the Upper Peninsula." "I'm not sure we didn't get the best of that bargain," Alice commented. "It's certainly a lot more territory."
I went back to my maps, and as I worked, I thought of the students whose names were on those papers. Abe Lawton. I knew he was the only boy in a family of girls, and as such felt entitled to be the boss of the clan. That his responsibility didn't include the whole school had never occurred to him. He was loud, rude, unkempt, and rough, but so far he had not given me any trouble. He was just a minor irritant. His sister Carrie was the same grade, though she was a year younger. Julianne was 2 years younger, and Nancy a beginner. George Eliot was shy and quiet, as were his younger brothers Jamie and Toby. They were no problem at all. I had to remind myself to pay attention to them. There were 2 girls in the 6th grade, Elsie Matthews and Prudence Edwards. Prudence was pleasant and cheerful, and Elsie was the direct opposite. I thought she looked petulant and haughty at the same time, if that is possible. She declined to enter into our conversations at dinner time, and did the tasks assigned to her with an air of disdain. Elsie had no particular friends that I could see, unless it might have been Julianne Lawton, who was her faithful worshipper. The only other pupil in the upper grades was Joel Gage, the son of the storekeeper in town. Joel reminded me of Warren Carter because he was an exceptionally good student. By the time I had finished grading geography maps, Len and Mr. Williams had returned. "I was right about someone being at school," Len said. "The back door was pried open."
"Oh no! Was anything taken?"
"I couldn't see that it was," he replied. "Of course, I don't know what you had in your desk, but nothing looked as though it had been disturbed. Do you think one of your students could have broken in?" I opened my mouth to tell him about Abe, and then closed it again and shook my head.
"I wouldn't want to suspect any of them,"
I said.
I can't think why anyone would want to get in unless they forgot something. Even then, they could have come to me. I'll keep my ears open tomorrow. Someone may know something, and if they know, they won't be able to keep it quiet.
Len started upstairs and then turned back. Oh, you had some mail today, and I forgot to give it to you. He placed the envelope in front of me and left abruptly. The return address read, Russ Bradley, Ann Arbor, Michigan. I slipped the letter under my books, but not before Alice had seen the name.
Oh, that's from your boyfriend, isn't it? Is he studying at the university? Aren't you going to read it?
I nodded.
3 of the boys from my class are there this year. Russ is probably just telling me what they're doing.
I blushed.
I'm sure it isn't important. It will wait until after I've finished my lessons.
Alice said no more, and I was silently thankful that she was not like Sarah Jane. She would have made sure that that letter was not only opened, but read to her in its entirety. Good old Sarah Jane. How I needed her to confide in right now. She would know whether I ought to tell someone about Abe's problems and whether I should confront Julianne on the subject of gossiping. I would talk it over with her this weekend, but in the meantime, there were lessons to prepare for tomorrow. It was nearly 9 o'clock when I finally closed my books and gathered my papers together. Alice put her sewing in the basket and rose too.
It's nice to have someone to work with in the evening, she said. Even when we don't talk a lot, it's good company.
I agreed.
I'm sure I'll have more time to visit when I get this teaching business learned a little better. I'm anxious to hear about your wedding plans and where you're going to live.
Alice lit another lamp, and I carried the one from the table with me. I was tired and worried, too. If one of my students had broken into the school, what kind of punishment should I mete out? This was a serious offense, and the culprit should know he had been punished. When I dropped my books on the desk, Russ's letter fluttered to the floor. I could hear Sarah Jane's indignant voice. You forgot it? Mabel, when someone cares enough about you to write you, you might at least take the time to read it. Sometimes I really despair of you. I sat down on the bed and opened the envelope. Dear Mabel, Thomas, Warren, and I are all settled in and ready to begin classes. I have a pretty heavy schedule, but I'm looking forward to it. In spite of his jibes at you, I think Warren feels a little bad that you didn't get the scholarship. He thinks he could have worked and kept up his studies. Of course, I wish you had too. It would have been much pleasanter here if I could see you every day. Warren is a good fellow, but he's not much to look at. We've already decided that I'll go home with him at Thanksgiving time, so may I come to see you then? Please write and tell me how your school is going and what you are doing to keep busy. Say hello to Sarah Jane for me. I think Thomas has already written to her. Yours truly, Russ. I sighed and put the letter away. My school days seemed far behind me just now, though it hadn't been 4 months since we graduated. I wondered if teaching was going to make an old person out of me the first year. End of chapter 6.